so this is my friend Robert, and we are beginning the brewing process. What are we doing right now, Robert?
Right now, we're going to be milling the grains. We have about 10 pounds of grain, a little more. It's 8 pounds of German Pilsner malt, 2 pounds of German Munich malt, a 1/4 pound of just plain old chocolate malt, and a little bit of Crystal 40 to give it sort of a caramel sweetness.
And what kind of beer are we making?
This is going to be a brown ale, just sort of an aggressively hopped brown ale.
Okay, that's like the Munich and the chocolate that give it the...
So, any beer is basically, like, if you have, say, you want to break down any recipe into 10 pounds of grain, 8 of it for almost any recipe is going to be the exact same. The real difference is in, like, the few pounds of specialty malt you use, like mine, Munich and chocolate and everything. So we're just going to run this really loud drill, and...
So we have this hooked up to a drill, so we don't have to hand crank it.
Because that would take forever. And it's pretty loud.
Alright, so we have the grains all ground up. It smells really good. Now what?
Now we're going to heat up our strike water. So I've got to get a big bucket of water going.
So what is this device that's on your fridge?
This is our kegerator. 2 taps. These handles are pretty cool. So basically, it's a pretty easy system, actually. Sorry if it's messy in here. We've just got a CO2 tank, which we use to both carbonate and pressurize to serve the beer. And just running the stainless steel kegs, just like these, with O-rings in. And
so the fridge is just running?
Yeah, the fridge is just on. Keeps it cold.
And so what's the darker one?
This is a Scottish porter I did. It's actually a pretty just robust type grain bill for a porter, and I dumped some yeast from a Scottish brewery in there, and it came out actually pretty good. Nice and dark, lots of body, kind of an interesting character from the Scottish yeast. So.
And what's the
And
other
this right
one?
here is a Belgian pale ale, sort of a really hoppy, dry hopped with American hops and made with American hops, but Belgian yeast. And came out, it's pretty.
Yeah. So how do you decide on what recipe to use for a beer? Do you follow like internet recipes? You just pick a style, or?
Well, basically, you start by picking out what kind of beer you want to make. Are you going to make a pale? Are you going to make a porter? And then, the great thing about homebrewing is if I like, my porter's really chocolatey, I can throw a bunch of chocolate malt in. So you kind of learn after doing it for a while what tastes you want and how to get them. But most recipes say making 5 gallons of beer, you're using 10 pounds of grain, and most recipes use the same base grain, so, 80% of your grain bill is going to be just a pale base malt. And then if I want a stout, I'll throw in, a pound of black malt and a little bit of chocolate. And if I want to make a pale, I throw in some Vienna and some crystal malt, or, and so it's pretty much, I find a lot on the internet and tweak on myself for what I like. I find a lot in books. I have a couple, books that, some breweries put out the recipes. I'll even go online and find those, or sometimes just wing it and totally make up my own and see what happens. We made a sweet potato molasses porter, and we roasted the sweet potatoes. It's been a while, so I think we roasted the sweet potatoes in the oven for, just enough to get them to caramelize. And then we threw them in the last part of the boil and dumped a big bottle of blackstripe molasses in. And that was an awesome beer.
Yeah. What's like the craziest thing you've ever just added in?
I would have to say one of the craziest beers we did, I'm sort of, it's not that crazy, I'm sort of a purist, but we did a Saison, and we put coriander, orange peel, and red pepper in it to sort of give it a kick.
Yeah, the fruity peppercorn.
It was, I mean, we used, like, cayenne pepper.
Oh, like red pepper,
yeah,
okay.
Like, we used cayenne pepper to kind of give it a bite, but by the bottom of the keg, I guess where, like, all the stuff settled, like, the last glass I poured and drank, it was so spicy, I almost, it was like drinking pepper.
Like hot sauce.
It was intense.
So what are we doing now? What's that white stuff in your hand?
I'm adding about a teaspoon of gypsum to our strike water. It basically just hardens the water and allows the protein, sort of.
What do you mean by strike water?
The strike water is the water we're going to initially mash it with. So, like, we're going to dump the grains in there, and then we're going to dump this in.
Okay.
And so this just sort of hardens the water, it helps the conversions out a little bit. So we just put that in, mix it up.
And once it's boiling, we're gonna throw it in for the mash?
We want the mash to be about 152 degrees, as close to that as we can get.
Why 152?
That's
the same for all beers, or just this one?
It's not the same for all beers. It basically, it changes a lot. So for like Belgian triples that you want to finish dry, you mash like pretty low. So basically it's the higher your mash temperature, the thicker your beer will be. Okay. And it also, you know, like it also will sort of decrease the amount of alcohol slightly because it finishes with more unconverted sugars. The lower you mash, you know, if you mash like 145, you're going to get a really dry beer. So, okay. It's like usually for, you know, most typically American ales, you're going to go for 152 every time.
152.
So we want our strike water to be about 164 to 166 degrees because when we dump it all in the grains, it's going to cool it down like 10, 12 degrees. So that's why it's actually a few degrees too hot, so we'll wait a minute and then we'll dump it in.
So we're starting the mashing process. 4 gallons of water, and we just let it sit there.
We're going to stir it up to get rid of any dough balls and get it really evenly mixed. 10 pounds of grain? About 11.
Smells like oatmeal with no sugar.
Yeah. Smells even better a little bit after it does some conversion.
So what if you use like entirely chocolate malts? Would that just be like a Young's double chocolate stout?
The thing is that a lot of these malts, like when I talk about conversion, you need, like some malts don't have sugars you can really extract. Like for instance, if I made an all chocolate malt beer, it would
be awful.
It would taste like burnt roasted, you wouldn't really get that much sugar out of it because you need to mix a base malt like two-row or Pilsner or Maris Otter to convert it. Like, okay. So you sort of have to have a few type of malts. You could do a single malt beer, and they exist. But, you know, with a lot of the specialty malts, you have to have something there for it to react with.
Okay, so what is this new project that you're doing?
So this is actually a project my roommate and I are doing for school, strangely. We're developing a commercially modeled brewing system that's run completely electrically. So what we've got here is a 240-volt heating element, or I don't know. He's the engineer. I do the
heating element.
Yeah, so we've got basically these water heating elements, same kind of thing that's in your house. So you saw me dump that bucket of water. In the end, when this is done, it's going to be a 3-tiered, top, middle, and bottom. And what you're going to have is one of these up top. It's going to completely heat up the water based on data inputted from the computer. And then, you'll basically the only interaction will be you'll open a valve. It'll start the timer once it'll drain into the same mash tun. And after an hour, it'll beep. You'll open the valve. It'll go to the boil kettle where there's also a temperature sensor. And it'll pretty much, all you'll have to do is stir once in a while and throw in hops, and the rest will be...
So you just dump in, like, the ground grains at the top, the water, and then just...
Water at the top,
it just keeps dropping down.
We're adding
more, we're heating up more water to add?
What we're going to do is we're going to heat up some more water. So we're mashing right now. It's about time to sparge. The sparging process is essentially just the rinsing of the grains. It's really where you get your efficiency, a lot of your sugars out. So we're going to heat up actually more water than we used to mash. It's going to be a little hotter. We want this, it's sitting about 152 now. For a really solid sparge, you really want to be right at 168 degrees. So we're going to heat this up to probably 185, dump it in, kind of let it sit and settle again, and then we'll start running it off.
Alright, so what's happening now?
So right now, our mash has been sitting for an hour. We're sitting at a good temp, so about 151, so we're right where we want to be. We're going to go ahead and sparge, which is just rinsing the grains with hotter water, get some more sugars out of them, and complete the rest of the volume we're going to end up as our final rote for our
okay. So. What, ABV do you think this will be?
I'd have to run it through a calculator, but I'm aiming for about, 6.2.
Okay.
So we're going to see, and basically the idea is you don't want to disturb the grain bed too much. We're going to let it sit so it won't matter. So I'm just going to dump this water through the colander and kind of not let it just
why is it going through a colander?
Because we don't want it to penetrate the grain bed and stir it up too much.
Oh, so it's just to disperse it.
So just to sort of make it like dip down. Eventually, like we're building a 3-tier system, so we don't have to do this, and it'll just run continuously. But for right now, this is batch sparging, so we're just gonna dump a bunch of water in, get it up to 168 degrees, and then we'll start drinking. So right now, we're about ready to go ahead and just completely sparge out into our...
Sparge out?
Sparge out into our kettle.
Dude, I'm about to sparge so hard.
So, the first thing we want to do is basically we really want to solidify the grain bed, and we don't want any grain matter in the boil, because that'll make it more astringent. You just want the liquid. So we're going to do what's called vorlopping.
Vorlop?
Basically, we're just going to work through a couple times until the bed starts to solidify.
So we're just taking out the water. We're putting it back in?
Yeah. So basically, we just keep doing this until you can sort of start to see, there's a bunch of particles of grain floating around. So we're just going to keep doing this until that grain pretty much stops being in it, and then we'll start draining. Now we're going to go ahead and bring our wort up to boiling and start adding hops and turn it into beer.
Alright, we're using what kinds of hops?
We're using Warrior to bitter and Chinook for a little bit of bittering and a lot of the aroma properties of it.
And the Chinook are the whole hops.
Yeah, the whole
and the Warrior were the little pellets. 3 kinds of hops?
We're using 2 kinds of hops.
Or like 3 strands, but 2, we're using hop pellets.
This is fir.
And
this is actually dry hop of a pale ale I have.
Okay. Oh, that's not for this one.
No. So, I guess we can put them in it. We actually might. We'll see. So we're going to use Warrior. It's an aggressive American bittering hop to bitter this beer. And to kind of get the more floral and sweet aromas out of it and flavors, we're going to use Whole Leaf Chinook, which is sort of another spicy, citrusy, pungent American hop.
So we're weighing out the Chinook hops, and how much hops are we using?
So basically, we're going to start with an ounce. This is already weighed out of our Warrior. Then we're going to do 3 separate additions of Chinook.
You have an ounce of Warrior hop pellets.
Yeah. So we're going to add those to bitter. Then we have 3 ounces of Chinook. I'm going to add 1 ounce. Sometimes, you can add a lot of different increments, but it's nice to keep it simple. I'm just going to add 3 ounces at separate times, probably like the last 30 minutes to get like a nice aroma out of it. A little bit of bitterness or IBUs, and just make it nice and tasty.
So the Warrior hops are the bittering ones.
Yeah.
And the base ones are the Chinook?
The most basic way to think about it is if you have a 60-minute boil, and this is really generalizing, the first 30 minutes of hops are considered bittering hops. And the last 30 minutes are considered aroma hops. Well, that's not entirely true,
but primarily the beginning of the process gives the taste. The sooner you
add the hops, the more bitter they are. So, if you add hops at 50 minutes, your beer is going to be a lot more bitter than if you added them at 30 minutes.
Okay.
But basically, you always add a 60-minute hop. It's just every beer, and some styles, that's the only addition. Like Dunkel Weissens, a lot of the times you just add 1 ounce.
Alright, Robert, so you just added something with an eyedropper? And what is that?
It's called firm cap. Basically, it keeps it, when you boil something really sugary, it starts to foam up, so it cuts down on that during the boil, and in the fermenter, it keeps the head from getting out of control, so you still retain a lot of your hop character without losing any of the crowds in.
And you just bought that eyedropper at the homebrew store?
No, it's just full of that chemical. It doesn't cause any off flavors. It's just, I don't really know how it works. It just breaks down the compounds that cause the head to get really big, and it's just good for...
Well, is that going to make the end beer have less head?
No, it actually, since basically, when you ferment, you get a big layer of krausen, it just piles up and bubbles, and sometimes it'll shoot out the top of your fermenter. And this actually cuts down on that, which keeps it all in one place, so it actually improves head retention.
Of the final beer?
Of the final beer.
Wow.
It improves head retention, it keeps the hop character way more intact, because everything's sitting there and it's not getting too, volatile in the fermenter, so just a little bit of that, make our lives easier.
Alright, so we've got 3 bags of hops measured out. and our pellets, and we're starting our hop schedule. So what hops are we adding, or what is our schedule?
What we're probably going to do is add Warrior.
The pellets.
Warrior pellet hops. That's going to be our 60-minute hop. We're counting down from 60. So this is going to be our 60-minute hop. Then at 20 minutes, 10 minutes, and flame out, we're going to add each of these respectively.
And hopefully we don't drink so much beer that we won't be able to put them in.
I do this every day. And we'll start a timer for 60 minutes.
What do we do? Do we take them out after 60? Or we just add the next one?
You gotta leave them in to boil. The boiling really like isomerizes the hops and breaks down the compounds that make them bitter. Or you know, the less you boil them, the more the aroma oils stay intact. The more you boil them, those sort of break down and you get the more bitter compounds. So we'll start a 60-minute timer.
So right now we are sanitizing the storage container with Star San acid-based sanitizer.
Yep. You can see on the pH strip, it's probably, I mean, I don't have the color chart next to it, but I can tell you that's probably about 4.0, which is right where it needs to be. Maybe a little strong, but won't hurt it. We rinse it pretty well, so.
So now we are hooking up a copper tube immersion chiller to help cool the beer.
Yep.
That just constantly pumps water through it to cool the beer at a faster rate.
Let's go ahead and add
this second sock of hops.
We're going to actually add our whirl flock now. Which will just pull all the kind of trub and some of the hop particles and proteins to the bottom of the
whirl
tank,
flock.
so it doesn't.
And that helps settle out the other stuff.
Settle out and sort of kind of create a more solid layer of trub at the bottom, so you can keep less stuff in suspension to help your beer be more clear.
Alright, so last step, pouring the cooled finished beer in the wort into the fermentation chamber thing.
Yep. Whoop.
Oh, we're good. We're good. And how long are you going to let it ferment?
We're going to primary it for probably anywhere, depending on the activity, for 6 to 9 days, and then we'll go ahead and secondary and dry hop for probably about a week.
What hops are you using for the dry hop?
We'll probably either use Chinook or a mix of Centennial and Chinook.
Oh, adding yeast?
Yeah.
And what kind? You said this was Cali?
California ale yeast. It's
from
actually,
Sierra Nevada?
Yeah, it's cultivated from Sierra Nevada. There needs to be water in there. There's water in there. There we go. And now it's beer. Beer!
Now we're looking in Robert's filthy, dirty fridge.
Yeah, thanks for highlighting.
And what are those jars?
So basically, you know, at the end of brewing, you still have a lot of yeast left in the bottom, and there's no reason to waste it. It makes great brewing yeast. So usually, like when I'm siphoning my beer into a keg or into the next fermentation stage, I basically take sterilized water. I just boil, like you can see one prepared that's just boiled with water. And I just dump it in and pour in some yeast. This is a Weihenstephan Hefeweizen yeast, or I use it for a Dunkelweizen, that's why it's so dark. And there's all different kinds.
Looks
like this
nasty.
one I just washed. This is a first generation. You can see it's a lot cleaner water, and it's a way cleaner yeast cake, so there's no hop trub. That's I think this is just a California ale yeast. I've got Belgian Golden, so basically, yeah, this one is actually full of, I've got Tripel yeast, I've got Hefeweizen.
Triple.
I've got
Bell's?
This I actually harvested from a Bell's bottle and kept feeding it sugar until it got a pretty significant yeast count.
Wait, so you just took the yeast at the bottom of a
bottle.
What beer from Bell's?
It was the Bell's Amber Ale.
Amber ale.
And if you look at the bottom of a bottle of beer and you can see like a cake of yeast on the bottom, which is
the
pretty
bottle
normal
fermented
for
Belgians.
a bottle conditioned beer, you can dump that in a little bit of boiled wort and just
make it.
Yep.
What are they like doing right now?
This one is sitting in secondary. It's pretty much finished fermenting.
Secondary. Oh, fermentation.
Yeah. So some people with some styles of beer, and you really don't have to do it. You let it do its primary fermentation when all the vigorous part happens, and then to just get it off the trub. And I also use it to wash yeast and check the gravity. You just siphon it over into another container. So that's what this is doing. This is sitting waiting to get bottled.
You can see the bubbles coming out.
Yeah, and this I pitched a while ago, so it's definitely slowing down. The CO2 pushing out, as you can see it kind of creeping. But this one is a little more recent. It's ending the really vigorous part of fermentation, but it's still chugging along. So. And now it's beer. Beer and primary.
All right, let's drink it.
All right, let's chug it. Chug.
Oh no!
Oh yeah, it's a bitch.
Why does that happen?
Did you push that all the way through?
Maybe.
Kyle, goddamn, why did you do that?
No wait, it's soapy. We got this. Maybe.
Oh, that's not good, Kyle.